John and Emily had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Ever since they had decided to start a family, their lives had been filled with dreams, plans, and endless conversations about what it would be like to welcome a child into their home. Every night, they would lie in bed imagining the little feet that would soon fill their house with laughter, the tiny hands that would hold theirs, and the first words they would hear. John often smiled at the thought of being a father, feeling both excitement and a little nervousness at the same time. He wanted to be the kind of dad who was always there, who would protect, guide, and love his child unconditionally. Emily shared his feelings, her heart full of hope and love. She had spent hours reading books about pregnancy, learning everything she could about how to take care of herself and the baby, making sure that nothing could go wrong. Friends and family were equally excited. Every time John and Emily went out, people would ask about the baby, and everyone had advice or stories to share. Grandparents-to-be were constantly calling to ask how Emily was feeling, and they couldn't hide their joy when they spoke about holding the new baby in their arms. John sometimes felt overwhelmed by all the attention, but mostly, he felt happy and loved. He realized that this was not just a personal journey anymore, it was a journey shared with everyone who cared about them. The couple spent many evenings preparing the nursery. They painted the walls soft pastel colors and carefully arranged tiny clothes in drawers. Every little item in the room seemed to hold a story or a dream. John had even built a small wooden crib himself, sanding it carefully and making sure it was perfect for their baby. Emily watched him work with admiration and love, feeling proud of how much effort he was putting in. Each day, as the due date came closer, their anticipation grew stronger. They often talked about the baby's name, joking and laughing about what would suit a tiny little personality. Would it be bold and strong, or gentle and sweet? These conversations filled their home with warmth and happiness, making the waiting feel like part of the adventure. Despite the excitement, there were moments of nervousness too. John sometimes found himself worrying about the delivery, about whether everything would go smoothly. He had read stories of complications and difficulties, and though he tried not to think too much about them, they sometimes crept into his mind late at night. Emily noticed his unease and held his hand, reassuring him that they would face everything together. She, too, had her own fears. Pregnancy had not been entirely easy, and she had experienced moments of discomfort and uncertainty. Yet, through it all, their love for each other and for the baby gave them strength. They had a silent agreement: no matter what happened, they would support each other, and they would meet their child with open hearts and unwavering love. As the final weeks of pregnancy approached, John and Emily's lives were a mix of calm preparation and bubbling excitement. They talked endlessly about the first moments after birth, how they would hold the baby, the first smile, the first tiny cry. John imagined seeing Emily's face as she held their child for the first time, imagining the tears of joy that would surely come. He also imagined his own reaction, and every time he thought about it, his heart beat a little faster. It was a mix of joy, curiosity, and nervousness, all swirling together in a way he had never felt before. Every day, they tried to enjoy these final moments before life changed completely. They took long walks, talking about their dreams for the future, feeling the baby kick and move as a reminder that soon, their lives would be filled with a new kind of love. Friends joked about how their lives would never be the same, and John and Emily laughed, knowing it was true. Yet beneath the laughter was a quiet, deep excitement, a sense of wonder at the miracle they were about to witness. In their hearts, both John and Emily knew that nothing could fully prepare them for the day their baby would arrive. They knew there would be surprises, emotions, and moments that would catch them completely off guard. But they were ready, in a way that only hope and love can make someone ready. They had dreamed of this day for months, nurtured their bond with care, and imagined countless scenarios, but nothing could compare to the reality that was about to unfold. Every heartbeat, every whispered conversation, and every small preparation had led to this moment, the anticipation building like a gentle storm of excitement and love, ready to burst into the most unforgettable experience of their lives. John and Emily held on to each other, feeling both the weight and the beauty of the life growing inside Emily. It was a feeling like no other, a combination of awe, joy, and the tiniest hint of fear. They were about to step into a new world, one filled with tiny giggles, sleepless nights, and unconditional love. The waiting, the dreaming, and the preparation had been worth every moment. Soon, they would meet their baby, and everything in their lives would change forever. The night had been quiet when Emily first felt the sharp, sudden pain that made her sit up in bed, clutching her stomach. At first, she thought it was just another wave of discomfort she had grown used to in the last weeks of pregnancy, but the pain came again, stronger, more urgent, and unmistakably different. She looked at John with wide eyes, and without a word, he knew. The moment had finally come. Panic mixed with excitement as adrenaline rushed through both of them. John's hands were steady, but inside, his heart was pounding like a drum. He had imagined this moment countless times, but nothing could truly prepare him for the real thing. They quickly gathered their hospital bags, double-checking that they had everything, the baby's clothes, Emily's essentials, the documents, and even the small blanket John had insisted on packing. He tried to keep calm, making jokes to lighten the tension, but Emily could see the flicker of nerves in his eyes. She smiled at him, squeezing his hand, knowing they were both terrified and thrilled at the same time. The drive to the hospital was a blur of streetlights, quiet reassurances, and the occasional gasp of pain from Emily. Every red light felt like an eternity, every car passing by a reminder that life outside continued as usual, while their world was about to change forever. When they finally arrived at the hospital, the fluorescent lights and the bustling noise of the emergency entrance made everything feel surreal. Nurses and attendants quickly guided them inside, checking Emily in while John tried not to fidget. The sounds of medical equipment, distant voices, and rolling gurneys created a strange rhythm that seemed both chaotic and comforting. Emily gripped John's hand tightly, each contraction leaving her breathless, and he whispered words of encouragement, though he could barely control his own trembling. Every step down the hospital corridor brought them closer to the moment they had been dreaming about for months, yet closer to uncertainty. The delivery room was warm, filled with a soft hum of machines and the faint scent of antiseptic. Doctors and nurses greeted them with calm smiles, introducing themselves and explaining the steps ahead. John marveled at the professionalism and kindness surrounding them, though he could feel his mind racing. He wanted to be strong, to be the support Emily needed, but part of him couldn't stop imagining the baby's tiny face, the fragile fingers and toes, the first cry that would announce a new life. Emily, exhausted but determined, focused on every breath, following the nurse's instructions, letting John stay close, holding his hand as if it were a lifeline to calm the storm of emotions inside her. Time seemed to stretch and bend in ways neither of them expected. Each contraction brought a mix of pain, determination, and anticipation. John tried to be present in every moment, counting the minutes between contractions, encouraging Emily, reminding her how strong she was. They laughed quietly through the discomfort, sharing whispered jokes and small reassurances, trying to keep the mood light despite the intensity of the situation. He watched her face change with every wave of pain, feeling both awe and fear. This was real, and it was happening now. There were no books, no videos, no practice runs that could capture the gravity of holding a loved one through something so raw and human. Amid the tension, there were moments of beauty. The gentle way Emily's hand would brush against John's cheek, the soft grip he had on hers, the way they exchanged looks that spoke louder than words. They were partners in every sense, navigating the storm together. Nurses encouraged John to talk to Emily, to remind her to breathe, to tell her stories, to keep her mind focused. He even joked about the baby's first outfit, imagining the little socks and tiny hats, and for a moment, both of them laughed, forgetting the pain and fear, caught in a bubble of love and hope that made the room feel warmer, brighter, almost magical. And then, there was the quiet waiting. Between contractions, John would sit by Emily's side, holding her hand, whispering reassurances, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat beneath his palm. Time slowed down, stretching each second into eternity. Outside, the world went on, but inside that room, there was only them, their love, their fear, their excitement, and a tiny life that was almost ready to make its entrance. Every sound, every movement, every breath felt amplified, charged with anticipation. John realized that this night, this hospital room, and this shared journey would be etched in their memories forever, the night they waited together for a miracle. The room was alive with tension and anticipation. After hours of labor, every contraction pushing Emily closer to meeting the baby they had dreamed of for months, the moment had finally arrived. John stood by her side, gripping her hand so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He could feel her trembling, not just from pain but from the overwhelming intensity of what was happening. The air was thick with emotion, nervousness, excitement, and love, all intertwined in a way that made the seconds stretch like hours. The medical team moved with calm precision, guiding Emily through every push, every breath. Nurses encouraged her softly, their voices steady and comforting. John repeated the instructions she whispered to him, reminding her to breathe, to focus, to keep going. He tried to stay composed, but his heart was pounding like a drum in his chest. Every time Emily groaned or gasped, he flinched, wishing he could take the pain for himself, wishing he could make the experience easier for her. And then, there it was, the first cry. The sound cut through the room like a melody, piercing and fragile, yet powerful. John froze for a moment, tears welling up in his eyes, unable to believe that the tiny life they had imagined so vividly for months was finally here. Emily, exhausted and trembling, let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, and a tired smile crossed her face. The baby had arrived, and the world outside the delivery room seemed to disappear entirely, leaving only them and this miraculous little being. The nurse carefully placed the baby on Emily's chest, swaddled in a soft hospital blanket. John leaned closer, his eyes wide as he tried to take in every detail. Tiny fingers, curled like little hooks, a delicate nose, eyes that were still adjusting to the bright lights. Everything was smaller than he had imagined, yet perfect in every way. He reached out a shaky hand to touch the baby, and the instant their fingers met, an electric wave of love and awe ran through him. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the culmination of months of anticipation, worry, and hope. But then John noticed something that made his heart skip a beat. The baby's skin was paler than he had expected, almost translucent under the bright hospital lights. A cold rush of fear shot through him, and for a moment, he couldn't breathe. Emily noticed his expression and followed his gaze, her tired eyes widening in concern. The nurses, calm and professional, immediately explained that sometimes newborns could appear pale at birth, and that it didn't always mean something was wrong. Still, John's mind raced, imagining all the possibilities, his joy momentarily overshadowed by worry. He looked at Emily, seeing her exhausted yet radiant face, and felt a mix of emotions he couldn't describe, relief, love, fear, and awe all at once. He realized that this tiny human, fragile and perfect, had changed everything. His world, their world, had shifted in an instant. Every late-night conversation, every moment of preparation, every dream about the baby had led to this very second. And yet, the reality of holding a real, living child, one who depended on them completely, was more overwhelming than anything he had imagined. The doctor checked the baby carefully, reassuring John and Emily that everything was being monitored closely. Each tiny measurement, each careful observation made John's heart race, but slowly, as the initial panic faded, he began to feel a profound sense of gratitude. Their baby was here, breathing, alive, and beginning the first moments of a life they would protect and nurture with everything they had. John's hand stayed on the baby's tiny chest, feeling the rapid heartbeat beneath his fingertips, a reminder that life, in its most fragile form, was in his hands now. As Emily rested, cradling the baby against her chest, John finally let himself cry. Tears streamed down his face, but they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of overwhelming love, relief, and awe. He whispered softly to the baby, words that seemed too small for the emotions he felt, promises to protect, to guide, and to love without limit. The room, once filled with tension and urgency, now felt peaceful, sacred even. This small, pale bundle had changed their lives forever, and John knew that this was only the beginning of an incredible, unpredictable, and beautiful journey together. Even amidst the exhaustion and the fear, there was an undeniable sense of wonder. John held Emily's hand, glanced down at the baby again, and realized that life had delivered them a gift they would never forget. The moments following the birth were delicate, fleeting, and yet eternal, emotions intertwined in a way that would remain in their hearts forever. They had crossed a threshold into parenthood, stepping into a world where every laugh, every cry, and every tiny movement of their child would matter more than anything else in life. The first moments after the birth should have been filled with pure joy, yet an unexpected sense of tension hung in the air. John held his newborn son close to his chest, marveling at the tiny features, the soft curve of the ears, the delicate fingers, the gentle rise and fall of the chest with every breath. But something caught his eye, something he hadn't anticipated. The baby's skin was paler than he had imagined, almost ghostly under the bright hospital lights. At first, he thought it was just the lighting, a trick of the eye. But the longer he looked, the more he realized it wasn't normal. A cold knot of worry twisted in his stomach. His mind raced with every possible scenario, every story he had ever heard about newborns with unusual appearances. Emily, exhausted but glowing with relief from delivering their baby, noticed the tension in his face. "John, what's wrong?" she asked softly, her voice trembling with a mixture of curiosity and fear. He wanted to reassure her, wanted to smile and say it was nothing, but the truth pressed down on him like a weight he couldn't ignore. He swallowed hard, trying to steady his voice. I don't know," he admitted, his eyes fixed on the baby. "He looks different. Paler than I thought." His words, simple as they were, seemed to hang in the room, heavy with fear and uncertainty. Emily's face drained of color as she followed his gaze to their child. A nurse quickly stepped forward, her expression calm but professional, and began examining the baby with gentle, precise movements. John felt helpless, a witness to a moment he had imagined as pure bliss, now clouded with worry and uncertainty. The minutes stretched endlessly as the medical staff conducted their checks. Every sound, the beeping of machines, the soft cooing of the baby, the rustle of papers, seemed amplified in the tense atmosphere. John gripped Emily's hand so tightly that his fingers ached, his thumb tracing over hers in a desperate attempt to ground himself. He felt a storm of emotions crash over him, fear for his child, guilt for worrying too much, awe at the fragile life in his arms, and an overwhelming love that was impossible to describe. Finally, a doctor stepped forward, offering a reassuring but serious tone. "It's normal for some babies to appear pale at birth," she explained. "It doesn't always mean there's a problem, but we will run a few tests to be sure." John nodded, but his chest still felt tight. The reality of holding a vulnerable life, one that depended entirely on him and Emily, hit harder than anything he had ever imagined. The thought that something could be wrong was unbearable, and he realized just how powerless he felt in the face of life's unpredictability. Emily, sensing his anxiety, pressed her forehead against his shoulder and whispered words of comfort. "It's okay, John. He's here. We'll get through this." Her voice, fragile but full of love, anchored him. He exhaled shakily, trying to calm the panic rising inside. Every instinct in him screamed to protect the baby, to make everything perfect, yet he understood that some things were beyond their control. All they could do was wait, support each other, and trust the doctors who now held the responsibility of ensuring their child's health. As the medical team continued their careful assessment, John's eyes never left the baby. He watched every movement, every blink, every tiny shift, trying to memorize it all. He whispered softly to the child, words filled with love and apology, though he knew the baby couldn't understand yet. "You're safe now. Daddy's here. Mommy's here, we won't let anything happen to you." Each word carried the weight of his fear and the depth of his love, and as he spoke, he felt an unfamiliar lump rising in his throat, threatening to overflow in tears he had been holding back. Minutes turned into what felt like hours, yet finally, the doctor's expression softened. "Everything is fine," she said gently. "We'll monitor him closely, but there's nothing to worry about right now." Relief washed over John in a way that made him almost dizzy. Tears began to stream down his face, not tears of sorrow, but of overwhelming gratitude, love, and a release of the tension he hadn't realized he was holding. He looked at Emily, whose own tears mirrored his, and together they shared a moment of silent understanding. Their lives had changed forever. Holding their baby, pale as he was in that moment, John felt an intense mixture of awe and humility. Life had thrown them a sudden, unexpected shock, a reminder of how fragile and unpredictable it could be. And yet, amidst the fear, the love they felt for this tiny human was unshakable. He realized that the journey had only just begun, and though there would be challenges ahead, the bond he now felt, unbreakable, profound, and immediate, would carry him through anything. In those first moments of shock and worry, John understood what it truly meant to be a father. The room was quiet now, the initial panic replaced by a tense anticipation. John's hands were still trembling as he held his newborn baby, staring down at the tiny face that seemed so fragile in his arms. Every thought in his mind raced faster than he could follow. What if something was wrong? What if the baby needed more care than they could give? Emily, exhausted but alert, rested beside him, her hand lightly brushing the baby's cheek, her eyes filled with concern and hope. The doctors and nurses moved with calm efficiency, running tests and monitoring the baby's vitals, and John found himself holding his breath with every beep of the machines. Finally, the lead pediatrician stepped forward. Her expression was kind but serious, the kind of look that made John's heart skip a beat. She knelt beside the baby, gently lifting a tiny hand to check the circulation and skin tone. John leaned closer, hanging on her every word, while Emily's eyes remained fixed on the baby, her fingers lightly clutching John's. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter," the doctor began softly, "the baby's paleness is due to a condition called jaundice and mild anemia. It's not uncommon in newborns, and it's treatable. He just needs some care, monitoring, and a few simple treatments to get him healthy." John felt the words sink in slowly, almost like the world around him had shifted. Relief came first, flooding through him in waves, but it was mixed with an emotional intensity he hadn't expected. He looked at Emily, whose tears of worry were now soft tears of relief. For a moment, neither spoke, both simply staring at the baby whose tiny fingers curled around their hands, who had already survived the first challenge of life with the resilience of someone much older than he looked. The realization hit John with full force: his child was alive, and though there had been a moment of fear, nothing could diminish the love he felt in that instant. Tears began to run down John's cheeks as he whispered to the baby, his voice shaky but filled with absolute devotion. "You're okay, you're safe. Daddy's here. Mommy's here, we'll take care of you." Emily joined him, pressing her lips to the baby's forehead, her own tears leaving tiny wet marks on the hospital blanket. The baby stirred, lifting his tiny head slightly as if responding to their voices, and John felt a mixture of awe and gratitude that was almost too strong to bear. This was the moment he had imagined countless times, the moment he had dreamed of during late-night conversations and quiet walks through their empty home, and now it was real, more real than he could have ever expected. The doctors explained the next steps carefully. The baby would need a short stay in the nursery for light therapy and observation, and they would monitor his blood and overall health. John listened intently, asking questions, making mental notes of everything they said, determined to understand every detail. Emily nodded along, her energy returning slightly as she realized the baby's condition was serious but manageable. Together, they formed an unspoken agreement to stay strong, to face whatever came next as a team, and to never let fear overwhelm the love they already felt for their child. As the medical team prepared to take the baby for treatment, John held him one last time for the moment, feeling the rapid heartbeat beneath his palm, marveling at the tiny chest rising and falling. He whispered promises he hoped would be remembered, though he knew the baby couldn't understand yet. "We'll get through this together. You're our son, and we love you more than anything in this world." Emily leaned in, pressing her forehead against his shoulder, sharing in that promise. In that quiet room, surrounded by machines and hospital staff, a bond had formed, stronger, deeper, and more unbreakable than anything John had ever felt. After the baby was taken for light therapy, John and Emily sat in the room, hands intertwined, hearts still racing but filled with relief. The fear that had gripped them moments before was replaced with hope and gratitude. They realized how fragile and precious life was, how quickly a moment could swing between joy and panic, and yet how resilient the human spirit could be when driven by love. John couldn't stop thinking about the journey that had led to this point, from the quiet nights of dreaming about their child to the chaos and tension of labor, and now to this first real glimpse of parenthood. By the end of the day, John and Emily had learned something they could never forget, that love could endure fear, that hope could triumph over panic, and that even the most unexpected challenges could strengthen their bond as a family. The discovery of the baby's condition had been shocking, yes, but it had also revealed a depth of emotion, courage, and connection that would stay with them forever. Holding each other close, they waited for the next step in their baby's journey, hearts full and ready for the adventure that was only just beginning. John could hardly believe the whirlwind of emotions that had hit him in the last few hours. Relief, love, fear, and awe all collided in his chest, making it feel like it could burst. He had imagined holding his child for the first time, yes, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality, the tiny human in his arms, pale and fragile, who depended entirely on him and Emily. As he looked at the baby, all the tension, the waiting, and the worry from the last days and nights came rushing out at once. His knees felt weak, and he sank into the chair beside Emily, gripping the baby tightly, as if letting go even slightly would make the world fall apart. Tears streamed down his face, unchecked and unstoppable. At first, they were quiet, almost shy, but soon they poured freely, leaving tracks down his cheeks. Emily, exhausted from hours of labor, watched him silently at first, then reached out, taking his hand in hers. "It's okay, John," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Let it out. It's okay to feel everything." Her words were gentle, filled with love and understanding, and John leaned into her, sobbing like he hadn't cried in years. The room, once tense with fear, was now filled with the sound of raw, unfiltered emotion, a mixture of relief, joy, and profound gratitude. The baby stirred in his arms, tiny fingers curling around John's thumb as if sensing the father's overwhelming feelings. In that moment, John realized just how deeply connected he already was to this little life, how utterly consumed he felt by the responsibility and the love he had for someone so small and vulnerable. Every fear he had felt, the fear of something going wrong, of not being enough, of life suddenly becoming more complicated, melted away in that instant, replaced by a fierce, all-consuming love. "I can't believe he's here," John murmured through his tears, his voice shaky but full of wonder. "I can't believe he's really here, our son, our little boy." Emily leaned her head against his shoulder, her own eyes glistening, and they shared a quiet, intimate moment, understanding without words how much this tiny life had changed everything. They had spent months dreaming about the future, imagining what it would be like to hold their child, but the reality was far more powerful, far more emotional than they had ever anticipated. John's tears were not only for the relief that the baby was okay, but also for the intensity of the journey that had brought them to this point. The anticipation, the hospital ride, the long hours of labor, the fear sparked by the baby's pale skin, it all collided now in one overwhelming wave. He could feel the weight of the last 9 months, of every late night and anxious thought, pressing down on him, and for the first time, he let himself fully release it. Emily held him close, her hand rubbing his back soothingly, whispering reassurances that seemed to melt the last of the fear away. The nurses, sensing the emotional moment, gave them privacy, allowing John to express every feeling without interruption. He whispered promises to the baby, words of love and protection that he had been holding in his heart since learning Emily was pregnant. "I'll always protect you. I'll always be here. Mommy and I love you more than anything in this world." His voice wavered with emotion, but the words carried the raw truth of his heart, and Emily joined him, her whispers merging with his, forming a circle of love around the tiny newborn who had already brought so much meaning into their lives. Time seemed to stand still. Outside the room, the hospital hummed with activity, but inside, John, Emily, and their baby existed in a bubble of intimacy and overwhelming emotion. Every breath, every heartbeat, every tiny movement of the baby was magnified in their awareness. John realized that parenthood was not just about joy or responsibility, it was about surrendering to love so intense it could make you break down completely and still feel stronger than ever before. Eventually, John wiped his tears, but the feeling didn't leave him. The emotional breakdown had purged the fear and anxiety, leaving him open, vulnerable, and fully connected to his new role as a father. Holding his son, watching Emily rest beside him, he felt a sense of gratitude so deep it was almost spiritual. Life had tested them, shaken them, and then gifted them this miraculous moment. In that quiet, sacred room, John understood that tears weren't a sign of weakness, they were proof of the depth of love, courage, and humanity that this tiny baby had already awakened in him. The first few days after the birth were a whirlwind of emotions, tests, and careful observation. John and Emily spent almost every moment at the hospital, watching over their tiny son as the doctors and nurses ran checks and explained every detail about his condition. Though the baby was stable, the reality of his paleness and the treatment he needed weighed heavily on them. John's hands shook slightly as he held the baby, making sure he was comfortable, while Emily gently stroked his tiny head, whispering soft words of love and reassurance. Together, they felt a mix of fear and hope, realizing that parenthood wasn't just about joy, it was also about facing unexpected challenges and doing everything possible to overcome them. The doctors explained the baby would need a short period of treatment, including light therapy and monitoring of his blood levels. John listened carefully, taking mental notes of everything, determined to understand each step. He asked questions, wanting to be fully informed, while Emily nodded, her mind working through every instruction the nurses gave. Though the process was overwhelming, they faced it together, finding strength in each other's presence. Every time the baby stirred or hiccuped, their hearts leaped with worry, but they reminded themselves that this was temporary and treatable, that their love and care could make all the difference. John found himself learning things he had never imagined about newborn care, how to hold the baby properly under the lights, how to monitor his breathing, how to soothe him when he fussed. Every new detail was a lesson in responsibility, patience, and devotion. He marveled at how fragile life could be, yet how resilient his son was. Emily, too, learned to navigate the hospital routines, asking questions, taking notes, and making sure every detail was attended to. Together, they became a team, united by love and the determination to give their child the best start in life. There were quiet, reflective moments between the tests and treatments. John and Emily would sit side by side, watching their son sleep, amazed at how small and perfect he was. They whispered hopes and dreams for his future, imagining all the milestones they would witness, the first smile, the first steps, the first words. Even amidst the worry, there was laughter too, gentle and nervous, as they joked about little things like which parent he would resemble more, or how he would react to certain foods and sounds. These small moments of normalcy gave them strength, a reminder that life was still filled with wonder despite the challenges. Over the next few days, the baby responded well to treatment. Each improvement, no matter how small, felt like a victory. John's hands, once shaky with fear, became steady as he learned to care for his son. Emily's exhausted eyes brightened with relief, and together, they celebrated every milestone, the first strong cry, the first feeding without difficulty, the first moment when the baby's color began to improve. It wasn't an easy journey, but each step forward strengthened their confidence and their bond as parents. They realized that challenges, while frightening, could be overcome with patience, knowledge, and unwavering love. John and Emily also learned the importance of leaning on others. The nurses offered advice, encouragement, and reassurance, reminding them that they weren't alone. Friends and family sent messages of support, flowers, and small gifts, creating a network of care that lifted their spirits. They understood that facing challenges didn't mean facing them in isolation, strength often came from the people who loved and believed in you. In the quiet hospital room, with their baby resting peacefully, John and Emily felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the improvement in their child's health, but for the support and care surrounding them. By the end of the week, the baby's condition had stabilized significantly. His pale skin began to pink, his tiny fingers curled with more strength, and his cries sounded fuller and healthier. John held him close, feeling a profound sense of achievement and relief. They had faced fear and uncertainty, navigated medical procedures, and survived sleepless nights, and now they could finally envision a future where their child would thrive. Emily leaned against him, smiling softly, both of them silently acknowledging the journey they had just endured and the resilience they had discovered within themselves. Through this experience, John realized that parenthood was not just about love and joy, it was about courage, perseverance, and learning to face life's unexpected challenges head-on. He understood that every obstacle could teach lessons about patience, empathy, and the power of unity. Looking at his son, sleeping peacefully in Emily's arms, John felt a sense of purpose unlike anything he had known before. They had overcome the first challenge, but more importantly, they had learned that together, as a family, they could face anything. The days that followed were filled with a quiet sense of wonder and deep, unspoken gratitude. John and Emily carried their baby home from the hospital, carefully wrapping him in blankets, holding him close, and marveling at how much life had changed in a single week. The world outside seemed the same, yet everything inside their home felt different, full of new meaning, new responsibility, and an unshakable love that had grown from every challenge they had faced. Their son's tiny hands wrapped around their fingers as if sealing a promise of connection, and in that simple gesture, John felt a profound sense of purpose, a realization that life would never be the same. As they settled into their home, every small moment became a milestone. Feeding, changing, soothing, and simply watching the baby sleep filled their days and nights. John and Emily learned to communicate without words, anticipating each other's needs and responses, creating a rhythm and harmony that centered around the fragile new life they had brought into the world. Even the sleepless nights, once imagined as exhausting trials, became moments of intimacy, a time for shared whispers, gentle laughter, and quiet reflections on the extraordinary journey they had begun together. John often sat by the window, holding his son close, marveling at the miracle of existence. He remembered the first time he saw his baby, pale and fragile under the hospital lights, and how that initial shock had given way to a tidal wave of emotion, fear, and love. Every tear he had shed, every pang of worry, had led to this, the reality of a healthy, thriving child in his arms. He realized that life had a way of testing courage, patience, and faith, but it also rewarded resilience, love, and commitment in ways words could never fully capture. In these quiet moments, he vowed silently to always protect, guide, and nurture his son, no matter what the future held. Emily watched John and their baby from across the room, her own heart swelling with pride and joy. She remembered the hours of labor, the fear when their baby's condition had seemed uncertain, and the emotional breakdowns they had shared in the hospital room. Those moments of vulnerability had forged a bond between them that was deeper than anything they had ever known. She realized that the experience had transformed them, not just into parents, but into a family capable of facing any challenge with courage, unity, and unwavering love. The baby had already changed their world, and they had already learned lessons about empathy, patience, and gratitude that would last a lifetime. Family and friends began to visit, filling the home with laughter, stories, and tiny gifts. Each visitor marveled at the baby's strength, his resilience, and the gentle glow of health returning to his skin. John and Emily shared the story of the early challenges openly, feeling a mixture of vulnerability and pride. They understood that their experience, though difficult, was a testament to the power of love, hope, and perseverance. Every tear, every moment of fear, had been worth it, for it had brought them to this present, this perfect reality where they could watch their son grow, learn, and thrive in a world they were ready to help shape for him. In the following weeks, John noticed a change in himself that he had not expected. He felt a patience he had never known, a depth of empathy that extended beyond his family, and a new understanding of life's fragility. The experience had humbled him, teaching him that control was an illusion, that fear could be transformed into action, and that love, pure, unwavering love, was the most powerful force in the universe. He looked at his son, tiny but strong, and realized that even the most unexpected challenges could lead to growth, connection, and a sense of purpose unlike anything he had ever experienced. As Emily cradled the baby in her arms one evening, John joined her, their fingers intertwining around the child. They sat in silence, absorbing the warmth, the softness, and the quiet rhythm of life they had created. The journey from the first shock of seeing their pale baby to now had been a roller coaster of fear, hope, and love, and they had emerged stronger, closer, and infinitely more aware of the gift they had been given. Their lives had changed forever, not just because of the arrival of their son, but because of the way they had faced life's uncertainties together. John whispered to the baby, his voice filled with tenderness and wonder. "You've changed everything for us, little one, and we promise to make every moment count, to love you with everything we have." Emily kissed the baby's forehead, smiling softly, and together they felt the full weight of what it meant to be a family. They understood that the challenges they had faced were only the beginning of a lifetime of learning, but now, more than ever, they were ready. Life had tested them, scared them, and humbled them, but it had also gifted them the most profound love and purpose they had ever known. And so, in the quiet of their home, with the soft breathing of their baby filling the room, John and Emily realized that their world had shifted forever. They were no longer just husband and wife, they were parents, guardians, and witnesses to a life that depended on them entirely. The journey had begun, filled with uncertainty, wonder, and love, and they were ready to embrace every moment, knowing that the challenges and joys ahead would only deepen the bond that had been forged in the first hours of their son's life.